announcements. Jane Wood spoke here about the Prairie, or Gulf Coast Prairie Conservancy, and during that talk, she talked about the Star Branch, oh gosh, I can't remember the name, but it's the cemetery where people are buried directly into the ground or wrapped in linen to become a part of the earth, and you have GPS markers and all. She would like to come back and present. She said, oh, I'll be glad to do a trace talk. Well, we have the trace talks already enrolled up through October. So I said, we also do something called spotlight presentations, where we spotlight a topic. So if you would be interested in hearing about that. And the second thing is she's very keen on history, and she's prepared a couple of topics. In fact, Margaret initially introduced me, Margaret Carlson, that she has a talk about Lewis and Clark. And she thought that would be very exciting to share before our 250th anniversary. So if you're interested in that, I'll try and work out something at a different time, although there's no time that we're not all going to physical therapy, or going to fitness, so I'll try and propose some times for that. And then the other thing is, I'm getting a little team to help me publicize this, because we're going to be, we are 1,200 people, and we're getting another 150, but there's only 6 towers, and there's only, 6 slots on them. So we can put our flyers in the mailroom 2 weeks ahead, but we can also put them on our doors if you, if you don't mind that. So just another way to help people be aware of what's going on. It's just so cool when people give of themselves and share, kind of what's behind the curtain about their lives. And so that's why I'm so delighted that Skip is going to be here. We have 5 minutes, so I was trying to play the Deepwater Horizon trailer, but I had some technical difficulties here. But Skip did a lot of the research and design work on these platforms, which are so amazingly complicated, and as we know from the Deepwater Horizon and all that. So it's really an honor that he's going to share his time with us, and his 30 years at Shell, and then he was in the offshore research technology consortium group, and he has some funny things to share with us.
Well, I started out in graduate school to work for NASA. I was on a 4-year fellowship to get a PhD. And it was interesting going to the University of Houston then, because they were educating all their staff, and I didn't have a class that started before 6 o'clock to make room for the NASA folks. So I basically went to graduate school at night. My wife worked for Shell, and when I graduated, I thought I was going to go into space, but the space race crashed in '67, and I graduated in '68. So through her, I talked to some Shell people, and ended up getting an offer and deciding to go to work for Shell. Of course, not in space, but in oceanography, that's close enough. And the president of Shell called her in and said, we don't make exceptions very often to have both the husband and wife work for the same for our company. But in your case, you're such an excellent secretary, we'll make an exception. And she said, thank you, sir. You don't have enough money. So she retired and I started. Anyway, I have a question. Where do
Oh, did I take that?
So,
That'll wait for me to clicker. Oh, you got it. Okay.
so what I'd like to do is tell you a bit about what I did with my career and talk about the development, not only technologically, but people-wise. In '68, when I started, every company was kind of to themselves. Not much was shared. And the problems we had to face were so big that we ended up doing a lot of stuff as joint industry. And it helped all the oceanographers and ocean engineers across all the company know each other and trust each other. And we were able to really use everybody in developing this technology. And I think it was necessary. It was a lot of fun. There was a lot of great people. And so this is not just a shell thing.
Other way, sorry.
I'm going to talk about development of deep water in the Gulf. Deep water is defined as 1,000 feet or deeper. What we have to worry about is hurricanes. That is the design event to which these offshore platforms have to be able to withstand. Some do, some don't. We'll talk about that. Studying hurricanes led to modern design criteria. And first we had to predict the hurricanes, the historical hurricanes, instead of forecasting, called it hindcasting. But we all got together initially and instrumented 6 platforms offshore off the coast of Louisiana in 300 or 400 feet of water. There were 10 companies that participated in that. We measured for 3 years and got a lot of hurricane data, including Camille. And from that, we hired another brilliant consultant to develop a model to describe the wind waves and currents of a hurricane. A hurricane is driven, its intensity is driven by the central pressure, the radius to max wind, and the forward speed of the storm. And the models to really predict the complete wave field throughout a hurricane are fairly complicated. And then with that data, we hindcast probably 20 of the worst hurricanes in history. And then it was hurricane wave data throughout the Gulf, and then prepared statistics to come up what we thought were conservative values. And so we designed for the storm that would happen on average in 1 in 100 years. This is a picture of a platform in a hurricane. And like I said, this was the catalyst, this joint industry first of measuring and then developing criteria that really led the industry to be strong and safe. The industries were, these studies were the catalyst to a lot of strength in the development. I'm sorry. Okay, so I'm going to talk about fixed platforms for a little bit. So these are in shallow water. The ones on the far left are just small. They're about 50, 70 feet of water, close to the mouth of the Mississippi River. And they didn't develop a lot of oil, but they were the first things to go. As time went on, platforms got further and further out in deeper and deeper water. And the first star you have is in South Pass Block 70. Now that is a name given to a location by the Minerals Management Service. We got more clever later on. The second platform I wanted to point out is Cognac. Now in that lease sale, Shell decided to use booze as a way to name all their platforms that they were bidding, or leases that they were bidding on. Other companies used other ways. We all had our secrets. It was in 1,025 feet of water. So we went from 350 to over 1,000. It was a 3-part platform. It was built in bottom, middle, and top sections, and launched separately and put together while it was at sea. The third platform was Bullwinkle. That was the comedy lease sale. And it was in 1,350 feet of water. And that's the deepest platform, and it kind of rivals the big building in New York. So that's the Cognac and Bullwinkle are still operational, still making oil. To the right.
Backwards.
That's,
There you go.
that's Bullwinkle. And that's Skip with his Bullwinkle shirt on. That didn't work today. These are the way deep water leases looked in the Gulf in 92 and 93. There weren't a lot of leases that had been bought, and so deep water was really just getting started. 10 years later, there was a lot more interest in deep water, and leases went out to several thousand feet of water. There was a lot of technology in the design sense that had to be developed for platforms in such deep water. And again, the industry cooperated through a number of joint industry projects to come up with the mathematical and computer systems to be able to calculate those. The deep water development is mostly in terms of three types of systems. One is a TLP, that's a tension-led platform, and I'll explain what these are in a minute. The second one's a spar, and the third one is a semi-submersible. And we'll first look at the TLP as a project. The TLP looks like one of these three, but what's important, it's got four huge corner columns that provides all the buoyancy that you need for everything that's placed on top. It is hooked to the seafloor by tendons, which are large pipes that are connected to piles at the seafloor that are driven at least 300 feet below. And so they're pretty substantial and pretty sturdy things. So this slide kind of gives just a quick look at the main parts. There's the deck where all the equipment is stored, maybe a drilling rig, maybe not. There's the hull that holds all this stuff. The well risers are those vertical lines down and go down into the wells. And then the tendons are at the corners, and they're at very high tension, and they keep the platform from wandering around too much. We're trying to keep it from wandering less than 300 feet in bad storms. And then, like I say, the piling are very, very substantial. So each one of those has a separate set of design issues. The deck, the hull, the well risers, the tendons, the piling, and the pipelines. And so expertise in each one of those areas had to be developed in order to build successful, safe TLPs. And through the cooperation again in industry, it happened, and it happened pretty rapidly. This is a picture of a TLP hull that's being transported. Shell happened to build most of their hulls in Italy because the workmanship and welding in Italy was just fabulous. And so they were then hauled across the Atlantic into Corpus Christi, where the rest of it was put together. And Brutus is just another name of the lease. This is a pictorial view of what all is involved in the top sides of one of these things. There's the derrick for drilling, reporters, about 200 people live on this. And by the way, when a hurricane's coming, all people are brought to shore. They take no chances. And so the various pieces are shown here, and each one of that is a different kind of an engineering and design feat. And then they're all put together, and it kind of looks like what's at the right. This is the TLP integration of all those things we saw on the left side to the hull. You can see the 4 big legs for the hull. And it's quite an operation to put all these things together. These are the tendons. They're huge pipes, and like I said, we chose to go to Japan because of the quality of the steel for all our tendons. So that pieces of a TLP and how they were built and worked. The second thing I want to talk about is a spar. It's a different type of platform, and this is 3 different versions of spars that exist. The classic one on the 4 left is just one big tubular piece, and we'll see pictures in a minute. And then there's one that's a truss that looks differently. And then there's one that's a cell, that's a smaller spar. The schematic is there's a deck on top. Those things you see that wrap around the side are vortex-induced vibration suppressors. If you've ever put a stick in a running stream, you notice it goes back and forth. Well, in hurricanes, the hurricane currents really make a TLP or a structure go back and forth. So those strakes are there to reduce or eliminate that kind of movement. And then there's the mooring lines. You notice they're not vertical. They come off to the side to a bigger, wider pattern at seafloor. And then the production risers come right over the bottom of the spar and go into export risers and pipelines to shore. So that's the third type of structure that we look at. This is a picture of the spar in construction. You can see how complex it is and how large it is. At the bottom, you can see some truck tires to give you some feeling of how large these things really are. This is the Mad Dog Hull, which is another name for a particular platform. It arrived in the Gulf of Mexico in 2004. You can see it's on a big ship or barge, and there it is ready to install. And there's the installation in progress. These things are all really massive, and working with them and getting them in the sea and getting them hooked up to their foundation is quite an effort. Takes a lot of skill, a lot of people. This is another spar, Diana Hoover. I think this was Exxon's.
Yeah.
And it shows kind of a different picture. The wells that it's hooked up to are pretty diverse, spread out. So you couldn't put one platform over that could reach all the wells, so they just put it over to the side and have pipelines that run back to the spar or the process, and then they're pumped back to the oil's pumped back to shore. So just a different way of doing business, but for a very different type of oil discovery. Here's Thunder Horse. This is into a semi-submersible. The semi-submersible is kind of like a drilling rig, except it's got four corners, the four big structures at the corners. You can see a little bit in the picture that's up to the right. And here's a floating protection system called Nakika. No drilling rig, and you can see the spread of wells on the seafloor. So this reservoir is much different. It's not a compact one, but a lot of little chunks of oil spread out through. So this kind of platform is used to hook to them individually. The wells are drilled by a floating drilling rig that came out and drilled all the wells, and then they're hooked in to the platform and then shipped to shore through a pipeline. Yeah, here's an interesting picture. This is Nika floating production system, and it's superimposed over Houston. And you can see that the mooring pattern is as big as all of downtown Houston. So these things are just huge. And lastly, there's a subsea platform. And this is one of Shell's. It's a gas discovery. And there's no platform above. All the processing is done in the structures below. And the gas is shipped to shore. This is Popeye being built. And you can see again how massive this thing is. I think this was built near the Houston Ship Channel. So this is a picture of the maximum oil rates that are going on in deep water as of a few years ago. And you can see the color coding, 3,000 barrels a day up to 37,000 barrels a day. And look a bit at this. The hurricanes were the design event, and I want to look at what has happened to some of the deep water platforms during Ivan, Katrina, and Rita. And those of you that are interested in and have experienced hurricanes know that those were bad ones. Here's how the hurricane moved through one portion of the Gulf, and you can see how many deep water platforms are subjected to very, very large wind waves and currents. These slides got changed a little bit. No deep water structures were destroyed, but a lot of significant damage was sustained. And we'll take a look at some of this damage. This was damage from Hurricane Ivan, and you can see how much of the deck and the deck structures got torn up by it. Here is another platform, and this was damaged during Hurricane Ivan. And you can see where the damage largely occurred during Ivan. And here's the Mars TLP, and you can see the damage that was caused by the wind waves and currents from Ivan. So on these three hurricanes, it shows how many platforms were destroyed. Rita destroyed 66. and severe damage is caused by the others. And this is a graph. The green stuff at the bottom is the small 100 feet or less things that are close to the Mississippi River in terms of how much they produce for that number of years. The light purple was the production from all the bottom-founded platforms in the Gulf. And the floaters were all shown in dark red or purple. And it shows what the production was, but these dips also show what was.
Yeah, click. The dip, click.
Okay. These, the dips show how production was stopped in these platforms. And often it took a year or two to get them back in service. This is a graph showing time versus production, and it shows the dip in production that was caused by both Katrina and Rita. You see by the dips, and this is the amount of production from each of those two platforms. So when a hurricane damages the platform, production stops, and you have to fix it. And that can take years. But production has recovered. So this is a graph from 95 to 2004 of total production in the Gulf. And you can see that it's recovered nicely. And in 2004, it's many times what it was in 1905. So platforms get fixed, wells get re-drilled, things keep going on. And as I said, I want to keep making this point. It's not just about oil, it's about engineering, it's about planning, it's about teamwork, both onshore and offshore. I was really blessed to spend my career developing technology to design these projects in the Gulf. And I had a blast doing it. I had a marvelous career. Thank you.
One more. So, Skip, when you talked about the subsea, and you have all these little ones because it wasn't worth it to put a platform, you said it was gas. So is gas less lucrative than oil? And is that why they did these little underground ones instead of a big one on topside?
Oil is a lot more valuable than gas, yeah.
There's an astounding number of structures lost in.
I'm sorry?
That was an astounding number of structures lost, destroyed in those hurricanes. What kind of structures, what took the most were destroyed?
What kind of structures were destroyed during the hurricane? Fixed or floating? What kind were destroyed?
Mostly fixed.
Mostly fixed. The floaters were significantly damaged and were out of business for maybe a year or 18 months. But most of the destroyed platforms were bottom-founded platforms.
Hey, how many people do you leave on a platform when a hurricane comes through? How many people do you leave on a platform when the hurricane comes through?
None. All people are evacuated from all platforms during hurricanes.
I didn't hear you.
All of them.
How many people would be on a platform on a typical day?
Oh, up to 200. Up to 200 people. By the way, helicopter pilots that were available during the area I was talking about were all ex-Vietnam, and they were excellent pilots. No worries about flying with them.
Tell them about the training you had to have to go to work. On the helicopter.
Sorry,
Helicopter.
I'm not sure what you're asking.
You said you had to go through a lot of training to
Oh,
ride
no.
that helicopter in case it had to go into the water.
Everybody that went offshore, even like me, just for days, not essentially living half-time offshore, had to go through training. And it was, I want to say swimming pool, but it was deeper than that. It was a pit. And there was a structure down there. And they would put you in a seat and strap you in, take you to the bottom, and you had to figure out how to get out and swim to the top. It was quite a training session. But it worked.
How many times did you have to do it? How many times did
You have to do it to get a pass.
Well, the class went on, as I recall, for a week, 5 days. And you were in the water all those 5 days, learning different things about getting out of the helicopter. Underwater.
Plus you have all your clothes on, and that's gonna weigh you down, right?
Yeah, yeah. It was very realistic. The worst thing was boots.
That almost took Grissom down when the capsule burst and he couldn't get his shoes off.
Yeah. Yeah. Anything else?
I have a question.
Yes.
So, in the installation, when you bring the, massive structure into the water, and is there any kind of dunking, like you are taking out gigantic the structures, right? Besides the hull, probably hull will float, but there are other equipment could be sinking down. Have you ever had an instance that you build everything from Italy, Japan, all different places and bring it over and trying to install and it sink to the bottom of ocean?
When we built things in Italy, a good friend of mine was over there for one of the TLPs. He was over there for a year and a half. And one of the biggest benefits, he learned to make excellent bologna. Yes. So the platforms and all the equipment have a lot of oil company personnel involved, both in the design and they watch the manufacturer and make sure that it's being built right.
Yeah, so as a whole industry, as a whole, never had an instant that actually, installation didn't go as expected and never dropped something to the bottom of ocean?
Not that I'm aware of.
Wow.
It was really interesting. I witnessed the installation of one of those 3-piece platforms that was fixed at the bottom. And it took days. Because you had to put the bottom section in, you had to drive piling keep it secure. And then the next section went out, and you had to have something to make them hold on to the bottom one, and then the third one came out. And they were very long installations. But
Barry has the mic.
Skip, what's the transit time for something as massive as those pieces of the platforms from, say, Italy or Japan?
could you repeat that?
What's the transit time for the pieces of the platform that are constructed, let's say, in Italy or in Japan?
Well, the transit time is measured in a few months. The construction time is probably a year. It was long enough for, like I said, for one of my engineers to really know how to make the money. So probably a year.
Skip, if you had to develop a deep water field now, 1,000 feet of water or more, what kind of platform would you rather use?
It kind of depends on what your reservoir looks like. If it's spread, you need to go with a floating production system that has no drilling capability, because you have to have a drilling rig go around to where the oil is. And then it's hooked back. All those wells are hooked back to the platform so it can be processed and then pumped to shore. Did that?
Yeah, thank you.
Anyone else? Yeah. Oh, there's two over here. Jim.
Just ask, how much is the semi?
Skip, how much is a semi-submersible cost to build and put in production?
In today's market, I don't know. But it's millions of dollars, but I don't know how many. I mean, it's a significant investment. You got to be sure there's a lot of oil there before you order one.
What's the greatest deep water that has been drilled and platform built?
The deepest,
What is the maximum depth that has been drilled and platform built today? And do you think that will ever be exceeded?
academic guess. I don't remember the depth. It's thousands of feet.
The last,
Pardon me, the last system I worked on.
7,000.
Was on 8,000 feet of water.
Was how much?
I don't know, can you hear me?
Yeah, you have to speak into the timidity, John.
Very tip, okay. The last system I was involved with went in 8,000 feet of water. 8,000? Yes.
What system was that?
That was BP, Atlantic.
Atlantic?
Good, thank you.
Was it like a spar or a, you know what kind?
What kind?
I don't know the production platform that my system ran on the bottom of the sea. It was all designed to work at the water depth.
Oh, there's one over here.
I have a couple of questions about evacuating these. What is the capacity of the average helicopter when you are beginning to evacuate a platform? How long does that take? Because I know some of these decisions are debated about when, but then you want to move fast. So how many helicopter rides and how fast once the decision has been made?
I'm gonna do some guesswork. I would say a day and a half is when the decision is made. And, I've ridden in big helicopters and small ones, but I don't remember the capacity. But they do get them all off.
Yeah. I just have always,
If the platform's very close to shore, they do it by boat.
Well, there certainly are those big helicopters they use for transporting troops, so, I mean, it's not just two-seaters, I guess. Anyone else?
I just want to make a comment. Normally, they do that in stages of evacuation. So they make a decision as what is a non-essential step. Like we may get the hurricane information week in advance, then they may evacuate it first. And then, in stages, so it's not like all 200 people are evacuated all at the same time. Typically, what I saw was about 15 to 20 was kind of a big helicopter.
So were you involved in that too?
No, I mean, I was in finance, but we see the dollar.
You get the bill. Anyone else? Wow, well, who knew this was so complicated? And it's great that you, one of your main accomplishments when I talked to you 2 years ago about this was you felt your main accomplishment was getting all the industry together. They're competitive financially and everything, but you were able to bridge that with science for the common good to get standards and safety and best practices. And we see why you got your Distinguished Achievement Award. Thank you so much for sharing that with us, Dennis. Next week, John and Brenda Markle are going to talk about their prison ministry, and they went to Guatemala as well as to the prisons here in Texas, so that'll be pretty interesting. Thank you.